We're in a very auspicious time right now in the Jewish calendar between Purim and Pesach. The two redemptions, as the Talmud says. We're between one redemption and another. Purim is the redemption within exile. Pesach is the redemption out of exile. The Purim story actually happened while the Jews were not in Israel. They were in between the two temples. And the Pesach story also didn't happen in Israel, it happened in Egypt, but it was the quintessential geula, quintessential redemption. In fact, the Maharal famously writes that the exodus from Egypt was not just a geographical event, but it was something that changed the DNA of the Jewish people. We became free people. From now on, even though we would be subjugated and persecuted and put under the authority of many, many nations, nothing could touch the essential freedom of the Jewish soul. And so that's what we're looking forward to. We're getting ready for Pesach, we're getting ready physically, we have to clean the house, come up with a couple more $1,000 to pay the Pesach bills, especially the eggs. We're opening a special egg fund this year, just to cover the eggs. No, but seriously, get some matzah, make sure to get the round matzah, that's the important one. And also we have to get ready spiritually. We have to get into the right frame of mind of freedom. The frame of mind of getting in touch with the essential liberty that every Jew experiences. And I think tonight's class is going to be a little bit of an insight into how to do that, at least one step of it. So it's divine providence that we're studying this part of the Tanya tonight. It's also divine providence in that those who study the daily portion of the Tanya. Tanya is arranged for a yearly cycle. This week, we're studying these chapters that we're learning today. 35, 36, 37, yeah. Tremendous, revolutionary chapters, really. And we're going to try to condense it into one lesson. I'm also very, very excited to announce what's coming after Pesach. For the next 3 weeks, this week, next week, and the next week, we're going to finish the Tanya, kind of condense the rest of it into 3 lessons. Then we're going to have another Wednesday, which is the Rebbe's birthday. That's going to be, we're going to have a Farbrengen for that. Then we're going to have a week break for Pesach. And then after Pesach, we're launching a new course. It's called Secrets from the Zohar. We're going to begin to study the Zohar. This is a big undertaking for me because I've never taught it in this way. I've studied much of it, but teaching it is going to be a whole different experience. So I'm still putting together exactly how we're going to do it, and I'm going to let you know as soon as we have that. There's going to be a sign-up page which is going to launch very soon. We're going to keep the same format. I think we're going to keep it free. Just ask that sponsors keep on covering the weekly dinner. And if anybody wants to give a donation, it's going to be open as always. But that's where we're heading. We're heading for the Zohar. It's going to be a very big journey. It's going to be very exciting. And I really want it to launch in a good way. I want to bring in lots of new people. We should outdo this space. That's the dream. B'ezrat Hashem. Literally, huh?
And if for our first session of Tanya is any indicator, it's going to be good.
There we go. Everything has a season. The Tanya season is finishing. Huh? It's going to be Kabbalah, so it's going to be very much similar themes. A lot of what we studied in the Tanya is going to interplay with what we're studying in the Zohar, but it's going to be different. It's going to be a different type of a journey. A journey beyond time and space, that's what I'm calling it. So we're going to get ready to dive deep. I'm officially advertising it only for men age 40 and up, as it's supposed to be studied. The Zohar is supposed to be studied after age 40, even though we'll let your son in. We'll let your son in. There's people that have been grandfathered into the classes. They can keep. They can keep attending.
Really, the only thing that I'm really qualified for.
Even though I myself, I'm not even 40 yet, but it's a little bit of a hypocritical thing. But I think if we market it towards that, I think the experience and the wisdom that comes with after 40 years, that's what it says in the texts. That ideally, huh?
40 and married.
It says 40.
Doesn't say married?
No. that also, but 40. I feel like 40 and up. There's something that happens. I'm not there yet myself. I'm not even 30. Look at me. Who am I to preach about this?
They say those who can't teach. What?
Those who can't teach. Exactly.
Those who can't teach, teach Jim.
Something like that. So, but yeah, if you have somebody specifically in mind that's under 40 and you want to bring them in, please let me know. I'm going to be happy to let them in. No problem. I just want to kind of market it to a specific audience so that we can have the most success come from the study. I believe that once we're in that range, there's a lot more that you can offer me, so that it becomes a ping pong. Interactive in a great way. So I'm very excited about that. All right, that's going to begin after Pesach, April 23rd. Put that down. That's going to be the first class. Again, still coming up with the exact model for what it's going to look like. The Zohar, many people don't even know, but the Zohar is actually arranged as a commentary on the Torah. It's divided by the weekly Torah portion. That's how it is. Zohar on Bereshit, Zohar on Shemot, Zohar on Vayikra, etc., which gives us a little bit of a nice interplay to kind of have it accompany the Torah portion. But I might do some intro classes to kind of get us into the zone, because we really have to, you have to ease your way into the Zohar. It's not just something you can just open up and learn.
The Zohar zone.
Huh? The Zohar zone. You got to get into the Zohar zone. I like that. Okay, can we copyright that right now?
The Zohar
We're going to copyright that right now.
Okay.
We got to get into the Zohar zone.
Common law, copyright, got it.
I'm going to quote you on it. We'll associate your name with it. We'll TM. Huh? The Zohar zone? You think we should call it the Zohar zone?
See, and the year.
The TikTok feed.
Right?
Zohar
Zohar
zone.
zone.
Probably taken.
Good job, Jeff.
That's good. That's good stuff. So yeah, spread the word. I'm going to send out the flyer officially probably next week with a sign-up page. Put your name in. And we're going to kind of go, I think, in like series of 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And then we'll refresh it. Anyway, so that's that. All right, returning here, we're going to try to cover chapters 35, 36, 37. Here's how I want to introduce the concept. There was a rabbi in Melbourne, Australia. His name was Rabbi Chaim Gutnick. You can look him up online. He was a prolific, not a prolific, how do you say, he was a tremendous speaker. He had a gift, a magical way with words. He was a gifted orator. And he did not grow up Chabad, but he came to love and admire the Rebbe and his work. He ended up heading a big part of Chabad activities in Melbourne, really through the end of his life. A great, great man. He, because of his connections to the non-Chabad world, so he dealt a lot with prominent rabbis from other communities. And the Rebbe would send him on different missions, and he would ask for reports back. And he had a very, very open line of communication with the Rebbe. He spoke with the Rebbe like friends. No chassid dared speak to the Rebbe like as an equal. But he had this channel, and initially when I heard about it as a young kid, I didn't really believe it. I was like, it's exaggerated, it's made up. But then I found some videos. And you can see, like by dollars, by the dollars, huh?
What's the last spell?
Gutnick, Gutnick.
Wasn't he Australian?
Yeah, Melbourne. So he speaks to the Rebbe like just man to man. And it's amazing, literally amazing. So one of the times he had a private audience, the Rebbe asked him, says, Reb Chaim, you deal so much with the non-Chabad rabbis, the non-Chabad world. What do they have against me? Many of the Chabad rabbis, many of the non-Chabad rabbis, it was known they didn't exactly like the Rebbe's agenda. So he said, what is it that they have against me? So he said to the Rebbe, so it's interesting. I speak to them all the time, and many times the conversation boils down to two things. They have two issues. First issue is the Rebbe never consults with any of us. When he has a new project, he just launches it. Typically in the Lithuanian or the yeshivish world, it's customary for one rabbi to consult another one. I have a good idea, why don't we launch this together, give me your support, da-da-da-da. But the Rebbe is very independent. He He doesn't go the classical way of consulting with other Gedolim.
In other words, he doesn't care about what we talk about.
That was one thing. A second thing they said, the Rebbe seems to be so caught up on a midrash that's so far-flung. The midrash says, Hashem desired to have a dira b'tachtoinim, a dwelling place, a dira b'tachtoinim, a dwelling place in this world. This is, of course, quoted thousands of times in Chassidus. But it's a midrash nobody knows about. Why does the Rebbe talk about it all the time? All the time. The world has to be a home for God, a home for God, a home for God. That's their two general questions. So the Rebbe smiled, and the Rebbe said, I think one question answers the other. In other words, if you don't care about making the world a home for God, so we're not really talking the same language. I don't really have too much to consult with you on. Verstehst? Okay.
That's the whole point.
That's exactly. In other words, the purpose of creation, where are we going with this whole thing? What are we trying to accomplish with Torah and mitzvahs, is to make Hashem a home in this world? If for you that's a far-flung midrash, and not a practical part and a relevant part of Judaism, then we're literally, we're a little bit, on different pages. Anyway, it wasn't meant as a criticism. It was just meant as a paradigm. This is where we operate from. The Hasidic lens and the Hasidic approach is we're on a mission. We're heading somewhere. Life is bigger than ourselves. And in a big way, I think that's the underlying theme of these three chapters we want to cover tonight, 35, 36, 37. What happens is, basically, it's kind of hard to always keep track of this, but the Tanya is the Alter Rebbe's one-on-one conversation with a struggling Benoni. A Jew who's trying to do right by God, right by himself, right by his soul, and he wants to know some advice. How do I tackle life's challenges? And the Alter Rebbe is giving him a discipline and a program, letting him know about his own identity. Who are you? You got two voices inside of you, two souls. Here's the battle. Identify the battle, demystify it, and I'll go and do it. And he addresses different issues that can crop up, like we learned last week or 2 weeks ago, different sadnesses, different lazinesses, different things that get in the way. And then, basically, at this point, the Alter Rebbe says, you know what, after all is said and done, the Benoni really wants to know, what's the point? What's the point? I got it. I figured myself out. We did the therapy. I've identified my core, the issue's cores. We know what we have to do, but we don't know why exactly we're doing it. If you have the Tanya, this is a couple of good, powerful lines to read. Yeah? You want the book? You want a copy? Your best now. This is on page 387. Okay? Just going to read a couple of paragraphs here. The middle of the page, 387, where it says, and let's also try. You see that? Alter Rebbe asks, for the Benoni, he says, and let's also try to get some minimal insight into the reason for which Benonim were created in this way. As we learned above, he gives a little commentary, a person does not really have free choice whether he will be able to surpass the level of Benoni, external mastery, and attain the level of tzaddik, which is the internal mastery. So why has God created most of us in a way that we cannot rid ourselves of our evil? And we need some insight into why the divine souls of Benonim came down into this world to be enmeshed with an animal soul from Klippa and Sitra Achra. Why do we have to have this battle? God could have created us in a way that the divine soul and animal soul each had independent access to the body. But what he actually did was to enmesh the divine soul in the animal soul. The result is that if the divine soul wants to access the body, it must do so through the medium of the animal soul. But what's the point of that for the Benoni, he asks. Yeah? The divine soul has to suffer enmeshment in the negative forces of Klippa, and for no apparent benefit, since it will never influence the animal soul substantively, right? That's a tzaddik. A tzaddik can do that. So at least he can look forward to that. You're enmeshed now because you're going to ultimately come through and transform it. But for the Benoni, there seems to be nothing gained. Benonim, and here's the big line. Benonim seem doomed to an endless struggle, since they cannot send her, the animal soul, away all their days, and dislodge the animal soul from its place in the heart's left chamber, so that the animal soul shouldn't cause inappropriate thoughts to rise to the brain. All right, skip the next paragraph. One more thing, and since this is the case, we are left with a question: why do the souls of Beinonim have to come down into this world for a war which can't be won, for a futile struggle, God forbid, to battle in vain with the impulse to evil all their days, unable to prevail over it? I mean, this is the frustration of a person who's really trying. This is not some guy who's looking for the easy way out. People that ask this out of the easy way out thing, the Tanya is not their place. Every question the Alter Rebbe asks in the Tanya is a valid question coming from a really hard-working Jew. This is a Jew who's putting his heart and soul into it. He really wants to succeed. He really wants to do what Hashem wants, but he just feels like it doesn't go anywhere. I fight today, I win today, but tomorrow it's back. You know those like arcade games where you have to push the duck down, and then every time you push it, the duck keeps on coming back.
I mean, maybe this is where it's moving. If I'm jumping ahead, but it's interesting because I'm reading
Other things?
Well, I'm reading something that's not Jewish that talks a lot about this, actually.
Okay.
It's fascinating. If you look at it only as this world and this life, then it doesn't make sense. If you look at it beyond this world and beyond this life, and that this is just part of the journey and part of the process and part of the steps, then it might start to come into play. And
Okay.
make more sense.
Process to what? Or journey to what?
To Mashiach and to
Okay. Huh?
to the life after, yeah.
You're on track.
Okay.
You're on track.
Isn't the animal soul where
Well,
motivation comes from to be productive?
Yes. The animalistic features of us. I'm not saying there's nothing redemptive about the animal soul. There certainly is. There certainly is. The godly soul is lame, in a way. But he's just straight. The animal soul is pushing. The animal soul is excited. The animal soul is alive. The animal soul is animalistic. But at the end of the day, those are good qualities that come along with baggage. And the baggage is that they're constantly lusting, they're constantly craving, they're constantly tempted, they're constantly pulling you down, they're constantly depressing, And each time you feel like you're climbing up a rung and you win, but you win for the moment. And then the next moment, the battle's back.
So does the Sadiq lose all of that?
Yeah.
Is this gone?
He doesn't have-
It's just basically.
He is perpetually in love. He also has different free choice. He has a battle between good and better. I'm not.
Good and better,
Yeah, there's. Look, I don't know exactly how the tzaddik works. Okay, when I'll get there, I'll let you know and I'll tell you what it feels like. But something like that. It's a bit of a different reality that it's kind of hard to process. They're there much more for others than they are for themselves. They're there for God much more than they are for themselves. But a Benoni lives out this frustration and he wants to know, where is it going? Truth is, by the way, that in chapter 27, which was earlier than this, the Alter Rebbe also addressed the concept of struggle. And he said that there's something beautiful that comes out of struggle that cannot come out of regular work. Like the kick that we get out of spicy hummus, or the jalapenos that we had tonight, more than a regular cake. A cake is sweet, a cake is good, but when you get the unexpected kick, there's an extra value there. So Hashem also values the struggle, and there's, like you said, there's bigger or more cosmic parts to the struggle. But I think the Alter Rebbe here adds an additional insight. And I think it's great the way I framed it almost 3 years ago now. I think the last time we learned this chapter, because the seed or the core of the message really is the same. Essentially what the Alter Rebbe says is, you need to get out of the box of what do I get from it? And instead, you need to enter or graduate into the more mature and true box of what does God get from it? We are on two journeys as Jews. We are on two journeys. We are on a journey up, and God is on a journey down. We are aspiring to climb higher and transcend and find the soul. But Hashem wants to enter more and more physical and mundane spaces. And we are his agents to do that because we live here. We inhabit the earth. We inhabit this material world. And it's our mission to facilitate God's entry into every part of this world. And so as long as you view your life from the first perspective, how can I get holier? How can I achieve my desires in terms of serving God? Then yes, when you come up against a brick wall of struggle, you will feel frustrated. And there is no getting away from it because you have to face it every day. The demons never go away. No matter how holy you try to get, right after your holiest experience, Mr. Animal Soul is right there waiting to tempt you with the next temptation.
We talk a lot about our behavior from these two sides, but there's the two sides also affect our experience, how we experience the world. And I think it's that, again, I don't want to harp on the goodness of the animal soul, but to experience the world fully and to even experience or connect to Hashem without the animal soul, affecting that experience, we're only getting half of
Sure.
the experience of
Yeah,
connecting.
so long as you're stuck in that version, right?
Well, in
I'm saying you
life,
could-
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the secret is that you can even have a more fuller experience if you go the other way. Because we'll get frustrated if all we're trying to do is get higher. But if we could frame it from Hashem's perspective, where Hashem is trying to get his light into the darkest of places, there is no darker place than the place of struggle.
That is true.
It's a very profound idea. Because people think, or it could be said, that evil or pure darkness is the darkest place. But it's not exactly. Because as long as you're polar, as long as you're either here or there, so if you're on the positive side, then you're fully in the light. Even if you're fully in the dark, you have the chance to bounce back. You have the chance to appreciate the full negativity of where it is that you're at and come back. But where good and evil meet, where holiness and mundane meet, where the tension plays out, that's the toughest place. That's where evil is actually grabbing on to holiness. Conversion of the godly, of the divine, of the pure, into the impure and the negative and the unholy. And God says, yeah, that's where I want to be. And I can't bring myself there. That's the way the creation is wired. Hashem chose that he wants us to have this role to play. So yeah, as long as you're looking at it from yourself, let's call it self-centered, but not in the classic context of self-centered, of arrogance. I'm saying self-centered as in the center is yourself. As long as the center is yourself, then frustration awaits. But if it's God-centered, then you'll find the value in the struggle. You'll find God's desire in the struggle. And you'll find that there's something gratifying greater than yourself about fulfilling God's desire. Now that's my paraphrasing of what the Alter Rebbe said. I want you to see how the Alter Rebbe says it. If you go to page 390, okay, you can see the Alter Rebbe's original language, and you can see how, we're trying to distill a message here. Look what he says, paragraph beginning, now a person's soul. See the middle there? Now a person's soul, okay, listen to the words. Even if that person is a complete tzaddik, worshiping God with reverence and pleasurable love, that's like the highest level, of love of Hashem. Nevertheless, that soul still does not lose its separate identity completely, which would enable it to be extinguished and literally absorbed in God's light, and to merge completely with God in absolute unity. Rather, the soul retains its separate identity as one who is reverent of God and a lover of Him, but not one with Him. And as he adds in the commentary, ultimately the soul has a level of self-consciousness which blocks it from becoming completely one with God. As long as the soul's in the body, okay, let's just say that. A soul, this is how the Alter Rebbe frames it. A soul is and always will be separate from Hashem. Now, I'm translating that to mean that as long as your soul is the center, as long as you're after a journey of self-wholesomeness, the maximum you can get to is to be in love and in fear with Hashem, but always facing the struggle. Look at the next line. Skip that little commentary there. Bottom paragraph on page 390. But this is not the case with mitzvahs and good deeds, which are the will of God Himself, i.e., totally merged with Him. This is a concept we discussed way back in chapter 4, but it's one of the most revolutionary. Maybe today it's already mainstream, but at the time and in concept, we need to educate ourselves to really appreciate this. Defining the essence of mitzvahs. Typically, you'll ask a person on the street, what are mitzvahs? What is a mitzvah? So you'll get good deed, you'll get it's what Hashem wants us to do, you'll get it's our path to self-refinement, you'll get many different answers. But most of the answers center around us. The deepest and truest definition of a mitzvah is this definition right here. God's will.
Somewhere here it says the organs of God.
Yes, chapter 23. Yes. Literally, sacred, godly acts. At the highest level, eating matzah, it's coming up in a couple of weeks. I know it causes constipation and all kinds of good things. But at the highest level, eating matzah is eating God. Godliness. It's not so much training myself to be like a matzah. These are all messages, right? The humble messages and how we want to just be flour and water and plain, and this is what Hashem wants us to do on Pesach. Matzah consumption is a godly act. We can completely remove ourselves from the picture and just put the focus on Hashem. Now, we don't have so much time, so we're going to kind of skip around, but there's an awesome conversation that takes place over these pages talking about that. How the mitzvah is a divine act. How the mitzvah inspires and directly becomes a vehicle for God's presence to rest on the person and on the object with which the mitzvah is done, versus, let's say, the animal soul, the negative forces, those are divorced from Hashem, and they do not have the resting of the Shekhinah, the resting of the divine presence as mitzvahs do. Knowing that the mitzvahs are these godly acts, and that in the deepest definition, that is all they are, an extension of Hashem, that changes the paradigm. And I want to skip now to page 399, and we're going to read the first two lines of chapter 36. And this is the line that was in the story that I started with. What does he say here? The beginning of 36, the Rebbe would quote this line hundreds of times. Now this thing is known, the teaching of our sages of blessed memory, that the ultimate purpose for which this world was created was that the blessed Holy One desired to have a home for himself in the lowest realms. Dira b'tachtonim. Yeah, he brings in the commentary. There's many reasons given for why Hashem created the world. Many, many different elements. The Zohar has one interpretation, the Midrash has a second interpretation. This is the overwhelming, what he calls here, the overwhelming motivating factor for creation. Hashem wanted a home in the lowest of realms. That means that the entire chain reaction of worlds, what we call today in Kabbalah, Seder Hishtalshalus, the chain of the links in the chain of all the worlds, those are a means to an end. They aren't the goal. If the goal is here, that means that everything that's on the way there is just contributing towards a goal. Every one of us, we go to work. So in a way, a part of us wants to go to work. But if we can ask you, why do you go to work? Then you say what? I go to work so I can make money. So now the want transfers from the work to the money. But then I'll say, one second, why do you want to make money? The money can't just be the end. And so what do you say? I want the money so I can buy food and pay the mortgage and cover the rent. So, okay, that's what you want. But why do you want that? So I can provide for my family. And why is that important? Because family is one with me. And there's always something beyond the current thing that you want. And in order to really get to the essence of a person, we have to strip away all the layers and appreciate that it's all just a means to an end. That's what we call in Kabbalah, chitzoniyut haratzon, pnimiyut haratzon. The outer elements of one's will and the inner elements of one's will. The deeper and deeper you go into what motivates a person to live his life in the way that he does, the more and more you're uncovering the innermost parts of himself. So anything from the viewpoint of the innermost part of the person, all the other things fail in comparison. If you had a way to provide for your family without going to work, without making money, without paying the rent, you would dump those things in a second. Because those aren't the important things essentially. They aren't what's guiding you. The whole motivation is the end. The real end. While you're in the process, it seems like that's what you want. The person sitting in his office, if you look at you sitting in the office, trying to make that sale, somebody watching you will say, oh, that's where his whole life is. His whole life is in making the sale. But if you can climb into the mind and the heart, those things will fade away in a second. Same with Hashem. When he says, I want a home in this world, what does that mean? That means that everything else that I seem to be occupied with is just a means to get to that end. He has some pretty big words. Let's see if I can find it over here. Anyway, I don't see the page. Maybe it's on 401. But basically, he calls the entire chain reaction of all the worlds and the mystical worlds that we study for hours and days and months and years, he calls them all a downgrade.
Right.
He calls them all a Yerida. They're just, where is it?
It's section 2, 401.
Oh, yes, exactly. 401, second to last paragraph, exactly. Even these upper worlds represent a downgrade from the actual light of God's face. The whole thing is one big downgrade. Where's the goal? If I didn't have to, I wouldn't go through all of it. I'm going through all of it, what? For one reason, to get to the lowest realm. And that lowest realm, nobody can bring God there except for us. That's the way it's wired. It counters Hashem. It doesn't support Hashem. It even denies Hashem. It hides and conceals Hashem.
That's for sure.
That's for sure, right? And there, Hashem wants the struggle to take place and the winning to take place, and not necessarily the winning for all time. The winning for today and fight again tomorrow. Because every time we fight, we're bringing Hashem into another struggle, another darkness, making him at home in another place that he couldn't come himself.
Do we consciously need to know that?
Yeah. Because if we do, it will change the way we approach everything. We stop thinking of ourselves as on a journey to make ourselves the perfect version. Because if that's the approach, then you're going to come up against some real issues. Why do I have to struggle again and again and again? But if you put Hashem at the center, you're looking not to bring yourself up, but to bring Hashem down, then every opportunity to bring Hashem down presents another opportunity to fulfill the cosmic purpose of the entirety of everything we experience.
So for me to be in this situation, it's because Hashem wants to be in this situation.
Yes. What a great way to put it. What a great way to put it. Hashem wants to be in the situation and he has no other way of getting here besides through me. I love that. This is ultimately, by the way, this is Mashiach. When we say Mashiach, what he talks about it at the end of chapter 36. If you look at page 405 to 407, anyway, it's a whole long thing, but the idea of the entire world being able to absorb God. Nothing should consider God foreign to it. You know, the Rebbe once shared a very profound idea on a Shavuos Farbrengen, by the giving of the Torah. He said that God doesn't do miracles for nothing. This is a well-known principle. Hashem doesn't do things. A miracle always has a message. So the Talmud says that one of the miracles of the giving of the Torah was that there was no echo. Typically, you're in a desert, there's mountains all around, the sound should produce an echo. But Matan Torah, there was no echo. Kol gadol v'lo yasaf, the verse says. So the Rebbe asked, what's the message of no echo? Why change the laws of nature for no reason? And the Rebbe said, actually, the no echo gets to the heart of what the giving of the Torah was. What creates an echo? Why are there echoes? There's an echo because your voice, the sound waves, reach an object, and then because it interrupts the flow, it bounces back and creates an echo. In a soundproof room or an echo-proof room, what happens? There's materials on the side that absorb the sound. And when you absorb the sound and you don't send it back, there's no echo. So when we say by Matan Torah there was no echo, we mean that for the first time in history, nothing in the world bounced God back. Everything took Hashem in. When Hashem spoke, there was no echo because nothing was a contradiction to infinity anymore. Now that was a momentary revelation. Hashem didn't change the nature of the world. After that, it reversed back to half or most of the world being a big echo to Hashem, just bouncing it off. But ultimately what we do when we struggle and work through and refine everything in the world, that's what we're doing. We're setting the stage for the great time when there will be no echo because the entire world will host Hashem. So you want to get, yeah.
Does that mean that there was a point in time where the rungs were reversed? Because if,
What do you mean?
So God was on earth, on Sinai, in front of the Jews.
Yeah.
They had direct revelation.
Yes.
And now all of a sudden, in our lifetime, it seems like it's completely flip-flopped.
Yeah.
And so it seems like he went from being on the lowest rung, and literally on the ground, to somehow, over the centuries and over the years, moving further and further away from us, which is sort of...
Well, what the... two things. First of all, the Midrash actually uses that exact terminology. That Hashem was... It talks more about not the giving of the Torah, but more the creation. When Hashem created the world, he was down here in this world, and then the sins pushed him progressively upwards. The giving of the Torah was supposed to be the Messianic age.
Yeah.
In the end, it only turned out to be a sneak peek. That's really what happened. In other words, Hashem said, I'm going to give you a glimpse into what's going to be future reality. Right now, I am imposing it on the world. That's why it couldn't last, by the way. Yeah. Because it wasn't achieved by us. When we achieve it, then it becomes part and parcel of creation.
Is that Purim thing? Like
Huh? Purim was a part of that, yeah. Purim was definitely a part of that. We ratified,
after
yeah, Kimu v'Kiblu, definitely.
more real now.
It's more real, yeah. But when Mashiach comes, it's going to become the most real because we're going to have worked it through. I just want to get to your comment. What was it? Yeah.
It's an incredible lesson. Like it's
Yeah,
profound.
you can feel it.
It's making me think that our time in this life, this is the only time we can be doing this.
Yes.
Like when we go to the hereafter, or we're with the angels, we lose the power to
Wow.
make this Hashem's home. So
Yes. You want to know something? It says in the book of Isaiah that Mashiach's times are described as shanim asher tomru ein li bahem chayfetz. Years about which you will say, I have no desire for them. I don't want them. And the previous Rebbe once said, the Rebbe's father-in-law says, why do we call it years that we don't have no desire? Because we can't do mitzvahs in the way that it's a struggle and we overpower and we win. For exactly that, he would literally say, Yidden, cherish the hours that are left to the exile because this is the only time you can do the things that it takes to make Hashem at home. Afterwards, it's going to be a different way. I don't know how it's going to work with infinity and all that stuff. But for now, yeah, this concept of the struggle, huh? I mean, look,
Upgrade.
upgrade which has its own thing. What were you going to say?
Quick point, so, another reason why on a yard site, we remember, and we can maybe do something the person enjoyed doing here, eat something the person enjoyed eating here, because they can't do it there. But our remembrance, our prayers, elevates them in a way that cannot be elevated.
Yep.
They're not in this existence.
Yep.
And with respect to the lack of echo, I heard a great scholar once here.
Okay.
Talking about Hashem being limitless, Hashem being all-powerful. What could possibly stop the voice of Hashem? So it would not simply be absorbed, but continue to travel through infinity beyond anything of this existence. There's nothing in this existence that could limit Hashem.
True.
And therefore, there was no echo because it was pure communication
Yes.
with Hashem.
Nevertheless, because it wasn't worked through on our reality, it was just God forcing his way through, which he can do. He's almighty. We give him that, we let him. But then it just travels through, like we say today, in one ear, out the other, right?
Well, that's human beings can do the in and out.
Yeah.
Which is also a burden.
So we have to process it. Once we process it, integrate it, then it becomes fully real. And that's the job that we're doing nowadays. If you look in page 409 for a second, the beginning of 37, we're kind of really cruising through this, but I want to just show you the core points. The first 3 lines, again, of chapter 37, the top of 409. Now the fullest expression, you see that? It says, now the fullest expression of this reality of a home for God in the lowest realms, dira betachtonim, is, as we have in chapter 36, in the time of the Messianic era and the revival of the dead, since at that time there will be a disclosure of the blessed infinite light within this physical world. That's going to be, back then. But, skip that little commentary there. He says, all this is dependent on our mitzvah actions and our worship and prayer throughout the whole period of exile, which gradually and cumulatively neutralizes the forces of Klippa. So it's what we're doing now, in this time of exile, that's going to bring it about. Everything in Mashiach is just the natural consequences of what we do now. And that's why for this whole chapter, which is actually the longest chapter in Tanya, 37, he goes through at length the power of a mitzvah and the power of the physical mitzvah. You make money and you give tzedakah, you're parting with literal life. You put your blood, sweat, and tears into the hours to make the money, and then you take 10% of it and you give it to tzedakah. You're literally parting with a part of yourself, transforming it to holiness, making it a home for God. You study Torah. There's a long thing here about studying Torah. Transform your mind, your intellect, all these things. More so, he says, if you then go and make other parts of your life godly because of it, so the entire process becomes converted to godliness. The food you eat for breakfast, the food you eat for lunch, the food you eat for dinner, the gas that you drive in your car, all these things, the iPhone, it becomes a conduit, it becomes a vehicle for God. So it also becomes part of the dira b'tachtonim, it also becomes part of the dwelling place for God. Okay. I wish we had more time for this, but that's the core of it. What were you saying?
The question that keeps coming to mind is why God set this up like this.
Why did God set this up like this?
Where's Elia?
Right? There's always a why. There's the why of the why. Now I'm going to tell you something that I heard this week. Interesting you should mention it. I wasn't sure if I should say it, but you brought it up. I was watching a video of the Rebbe's birthday in 1972, 70th birthday. This was a watershed moment in Chabad history. I believe that there was no other Rebbe that reached the age of 70. That's why it was such a big celebration. Maybe one, but he was already sick then. It's Tzemach Tzedek. Yeah, he wasn't at his full strength, but the Rebbe was at his full strength, And so this was just on a physical level, this was a huge celebration. Hasidim came from all around the world. The Rebbe himself was in an elated mood, you can see in the video. Anyway, people were wondering, 70 years old, is he going to retire? What's going to happen? So he said, absolutely not, obviously. I'm not. He said, age doesn't go by the passport, it goes by how you feel. And if you're feeling good, you got to keep doing good. But he spent a long time expounding on the verse and then the piece of Talmud which talks about how man was born to toil. Man was born to toil. And he goes into a whole thing about why is it, what's the importance of producing things by our own effort. And so he quoted the famous piece, the line in the Talmud where it says, Adam rotzeh bekav shelo, yoter mitish'a kabin shel chaviro. A person would rather 1 pound of wheat that he produced himself more than 9 pounds of wheat given to him as a gift. Right? Someone gives you a few $1,000s, but you can produce your own money. We like or we value more what we produce. Because even if momentarily something from outside can relieve us of a burden, but we feel shameful in just receiving. It's called Nahama de Kisufa in the Zohar, bread of shame. So the Rebbe said that's the basic reason why we have to value work and toil. Because what we produce, we treasure. But then he said, like you're asking, why did Hashem wire it that way? Hashem could have wired the world that it wouldn't be shameful to accept gifts. And it wouldn't be so embarrassing to get everything from the outside. So why did Hashem make the world in such a way that we have to struggle and we have to work and then appreciate our work? And the Rebbe said something that to me is mind-blowing. It's so deep that you can just miss the depth of it. But he says, these are his words. He said, if Hashem had wired the world in a way where it would be okay to just get, I'm trying to translate Yiddish the best I can, he says, then man would amount to nothing more than a receiver. And Hashem doesn't want receivers, Hashem wants partners in creation. People to be creators just like him. And to be creative, you have to produce. To produce, you have to work. It's a paradigm shift that's just beyond. It's amazing. In other words, and I think it follows the line of the theory of these chapters in the Tanya. Stop viewing the world from yourself. Because as long as you're trying to achieve your own goals, then yeah, it's going to be hard. And yeah, you're going to wonder, why do I have to work? I wish the world would be just a bunch of people providing for me. But if you can rise out of that and you say, what does Hashem want from this whole thing? Hashem wants a home in this world. Hashem wants us to be his partners in creation. The Midrash says, Ma HaKadosh Baruch Hu borei olamot, af avichem borei olamot. The same way God is a creator of worlds, Jacob, which is the paradigm for all of Israel, is supposed to be a creator of worlds. We have to each create our world. We have to be there and manufacture something that the world has never seen before. How are we going to do that? By sitting back on our couch and letting somebody else provide for us? No way. We have to produce it ourselves. Yes, it's going to take work. Yes, it's going to take a struggle. Yes, the struggle will seem futile at times. But in the end, what is it? In the end, it's bringing God, heaven down to earth. In the end, it's becoming that creator, which is the ultimate intention of every single person. And to that we can say l'chaim. L'chaim.